Hello and welcome to a week 3 subscriber lineup review. My name is Adam Levitan. We are doing these roughly once a month, joined by Drew Dinkmeyer to tear apart and hurt some subscriber feelings today. Drew, how's it going?
Yeah, we're gonna focus on process, not results, but that can still leave you vulnerable to be torn apart if the process isn't good, even if the results are good. So we'll keep it with the idea of that we don't have the benefit of hindsight working when doing these lineup reviews. But good to be here with you once again today, Adam.
Yes, our subscriber won the honor of having his lineup torn apart by myself and Drew by being the Discord member of the month. Really, if you guys are a subscriber, highly recommend you are in the Discord. You're missing out on a lot of value. If you're not, as I said on the solo pod, I'm a stone cold boomer, and I was like, I can't face like even getting in the Discord. It's just like too much for me to handle. But it's a one-time thing. Once you go through the effort of actually getting in there, I do think that it's worth it, especially if you want to be in the prop street. But there's a lot of other good discussion going on there. Anyways, Jeffrey won this by being active and helpful and a decent person in the Discord. Won our Discord member of the month. Also got himself a t-shirt. And he's going to get a shout out tonight on the Showdown show. By the way, he's planted his flag on the Showdown show tonight. We'll be back at 6:15 with Cody for that one. Anyways, the lineup we're going to be reviewing today is in this tournament that we're displaying right now, the 20K daily dollar single entry for micro stakes, for low stakes. I think this is a really good option for people. It's single entry. It is large field. It only costs $1. I prefer my field sizes smaller when I'm playing single entry, 500 or 1,000 people at most, but there are plenty of large field single entry stuff to talk about as well. Drew, when you see a structure like this, over 20,000 entries, single entry, flat payouts at the top, what kind of lineups are you thinking about?
Yeah, beating 20,000 of your opponents is always going to be really challenging. So I think the first thing that you think of is in this type of contest size, you're going to have to be pretty different. You're going to have to find a couple different levers to pull during the course of your lineup construction that make it so that if you are right on those situations, you ascend the leaderboard really quickly. I would be in these types of fields, I would be trying to avoid really, really chalky options. You can have one, maybe two, but that's about it. The rest of the plays are going to have to be a little bit more contrarian, lower utilized by the field. It does not mean that they all have to be 1%ers. It doesn't mean they have to be bad plays, but it does mean that they have to be able to differentiate and separate yourself from your competitors when they do well.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. I think so many people assume contrarian means bad play. The idea is to find good plays that are overlooked by the field. Let's get to the lineup here. All right, Drew, the first thing that sticks out, unstacked Lamar Jackson. Now, I think before we rip off and just tear Tennessee Fats, aka Jeffrey Lee, to shreds, one of the quarterbacks that I think you can play unstacked, not saying you should, but one of the quarterbacks you can play unstacked is Lamar Jackson. Hope he runs for 2 touchdowns, runs for over 100 yards, does not throw any. By your face, I can tell you don't like to even play Lamar Jackson unstacked. So why can't I just play Lamar Jackson unstacked and say, hey, run for 2 touchdowns for me, run for over 100 yards?
The reason you can't play Lamar Jackson unstacked, in my opinion, is because of his price. If he was a $5,500 quarterback and he had this kind of rushing passing profile, I think there are scenarios where he can generate an upside purely on his legs alone that allow him to separate you from the field. Because you have to think, as the more you spend on a player, the more you need in terms of their production to really hit. So let's say he did get 100 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. Yeah, we're starting to get into the 20s, but you're still going to need to get like the 200 plus passing yard to get into the 30s. And the 30s plus is what's going to separate Lamar's performance. And so if he's going to get the 200 passing yards, he's in a condensed offense. You kind of know where those 200 passing yards are going to be. They're going to be to Marquise Drops Brown. You can hopefully get that Hollywood nickname back by actually securing the football next week, or Mark Andrews. And I also think in this specific situation this week, neither of those players were projecting to be very chalky. So on top of it, not only do you go the route of not stacking them, but when their stack teammates are players that are going to be naturally contrarian as well, I think it's an auto stack situation. So for me, when I'm looking at unstacked quarterbacks, it's rushing oriented quarterbacks that are very cheap, and I'm concerned about the play volume around them, or rushing quarterbacks that are very, very cheap, and their receiving counterparts on their teams are very chalky. Those are the situations where I might go a little bit more unstacked. So I would play, like last week, I would have played Justin Fields unstacked, but Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, too expensive. They're going to need production from the receiving counterparts to really ascend that leaderboard, and that's why I would want to have them stacked.
And one thing about that last week specifically was that I thought Mark Andrews was one of the best tournament plays on the slate. I mean, his usage was awesome. The first 2 weeks results hadn't been there. If you thought the results were going to be there for Lamar Jackson, I like stacking with Mark Andrews. It also knocks out the tight end spot. I'm always looking to knock out the tight end spot where I can, if I like it with my stack specifically. And that's why, like, I had a Cousins stack and I didn't love Tyler Conklin, but I was like, let me just knock out tight end with my stack here with Cousins. And that obviously ended up working out really, really well, even though I didn't think Conklin in a vacuum was like some standout play. Okay. This lineup as a whole, though, you mentioned you'd like to be contrarian in this field. This lineup as a whole does not have a lot of cumulative ownership. It doesn't have a lot of correlation, but it also does not have a lot of cumulative ownership. I think that's one thing we can say that Jeffrey Lee did well here in this type of field to get Alvin Kamara at 2%, DeAndre Swift at 5%, Claypool 5%. You know, like obviously at these micro stakes, you're going to see softer things. And I think those guys were a little bit higher at higher stakes, but still, even at higher stakes, I think those guys were all phenomenal plays. One thing about this 20,000 person field is I think Lamar skinny stacks. I think some more, you have to be more perfect, right? So like we can't just say, well, Mark Andrews has a great game and Hollywood Brown is okay and we still get there. That's probably not the case, right? So skinny stacks make more sense. Maybe some more uncorrelated stuff makes sense. I'm not sure. What do you think about the overall selection of players here?
Yeah, so it's a group of players that I like a lot, and it's a group of players that I'm pretty sure I was overweight the field on almost every one of them this week. Kamara, Swift, certainly. Swift was someone I played in the 20 to 25% range. Claypool, I played in the 10 to 15% range. Jacoby Myers, I had like 5 to 6% of. Emmanuel Sanders, I played in like the 8 to 12% range. Njoku, I even had a few points of. AJ Brown, I had around 15%. So like, I love the basket of players that was chosen for this lineup. But as you said, Adam, I think there could have been ways to correlate this a little bit better. And there is some correlation, right? Like Lamar Jackson's there with DeAndre Swift. That's a great correlation. I just would have added in Andrews or Marquise Brown and then called it a day on that type of situation. You've got Jacoby Myers correlated with Alvin Kamara in the right type of game situation, right? Where the Saints play from ahead. Kamara likely is the one driving them playing from ahead in terms of scoring touchdowns. And Jacoby Myers gets that kind of garbage time reception volume that you can get there on DraftKings, which he did. I mean, he was 6 yards away from the bonus and would have been in the 20s without a touchdown for 5K. That's a great play. So I think in general, there were like mini correlations in this lineup, but I would like one more on the main stack with Lamar Jackson, and I would like maybe one more mini correlation or strengthening a secondary game stack that you're including. Like we saw the Millie Maker winner this past week had basically a Buffalo main stack with a Washington piece coming back, and then it had kind of a secondary stack with Minnesota and Seattle. And I think you could have maybe done that with either, you know, I don't know that New Orleans and New England is the pace of game that you would choose a full secondary stack from, you know, but maybe in this situation, that piece that's around the AJ Brown level is correlated with Emmanuel Sanders somewhere, or the Manny Sanders piece is a piece that correlates with AJ Brown. Like those two pieces that are kind of uncorrelated and standing on their own. I think that's an area that, especially like with that tight end slot, those are areas that I might have tweaked this lineup a little bit.
Oh, I have the perfect mini correlation for this. The PSM correlation, the two chases, Chase Claypool and Jamar Chase, was a mini stack that I think could have made sense here. I know the results were good on Jacoby Myers and Emmanuel Sanders, but you get the PSM popping with Claypool and Jamar Chase going back and forth. I also thought Mixon and Claypool was a mini stack that I played that made some sense here as well. Any other takes on this lineup? I do want to make a micro take on Emmanuel Sanders. You know, I played Emmanuel Sanders, you know, somewhat infamously now. People are still giving me shit about it. Infamously now in cash in week 2 at 4K. No one was going to play him after he boned everybody, including myself, in week 2. Usage did not change at all. And that's like the kind of stuff that the Air Yards Buy Low model tries to account for. So if you're a subscriber, you know, there's also a free thing about how it works. I just tweeted that. I really encourage people to think about that for sure. So Emmanuel Sanders was just like a great micro tournament play. There was just absolutely no doubt about it. I know you guys had a lot of Josh Allen doubles. I know Jeffrey Lee had a Josh Allen double. He sent us also that we're not reviewing, and Leone and the Tilt Space guys won the juke with a Josh Allen double. Like that was just I talked about the solo top. It was just like really, really, really perfect. Any other micro or macro takes on this lineup? We had a question from PL02PL. He says, is there an ownership range you want to shoot for in single entry like this? We looked at the Millie Maker and it was somewhere, between 100 and 120 or so, 115 to 125, 115 to 135. That was the Millie Maker. Is there an ownership range cumulative you like to shoot for here?
Yeah, and the Millie Maker's been trending down early on this year. It's been actually closer to like 75 to 90 early on this year. And I think some of that is just the field size getting even larger and larger in some of these contests. I think the one thing that I'd note is generally most of the ownership projections around the industry are focused on the Millie Maker or the biggest tournament. And so sometimes in these single entry tournaments, or these 3-max or different field size tournaments, you might get ownership that looks a lot different from the field. And so the target that you're aiming for, that I would say is what you're aiming for would be representative of what the ownership projections are, not necessarily what's going to actually play out into the contest itself, because I can't give you specific contest ownership projections to like look at and try to pick from. And I would say generally with like the largest field stuff, I'm aiming as low. I'll put an ownership cap around like 110 for most of my stuff, 110, 115. I might expand that up to like 125 to 130 for like something like this. And then in something that's like a 500 person, I might even go up to like 140 and be okay with that. But generally, I don't want to go above that. And generally, there's always more benefit to being contrarian than being chalky. And I tried to highlight this on our GPP review show earlier in the week. But this week's Millie Maker winner didn't have Cooper Kupp. And it was a week where the chalk hit generally like all over, right? And so the point is, when you have the chalk and you play it, you book a small win when it goes well, but you book a big loss because you can't overcome it. But when you play contrarian and you hit it, you book a big win. And when you miss, it's a small loss. And so these are the things where you want to try to figure out ways to create asymmetric upside for you. And so generally, I'd always err on the side of lower projected ownership in my lineups than higher. You just got to do it with good players. And this lineup largely did that. Like Claypool, Swift, Kamara, good AJ Brown, good players that aren't being utilized by the field. Those are the perfect types of tournament plays.
Before we get out of here, bring up the first place lineup if you can here. And so the first place lineup actually played like a cash-ish lineup. Like I thought Barkley, CEH, Justin Jefferson, Godwin, Higbee, Big Mike were all in play for cash. If you showed up with any of those guys in cash against me, I'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're probably pretty solid. To beat a 20-something thousand person field with this much cash plays, and obviously at micro stakes, you're going to find that the ownership is not inflated. If you were in the juke or something like that, the ownership on Godwin and Barkley and Higbee, I believe, was majorly inflated. But in these micro stakes, it can be way less. Still, a lot of ownership here. I don't think that this is the way we typically want to play, Drew. However, if you want to go results over process, turning $1 into 1,000 here with almost a cash team is pretty impressive. What do you think of the team that won?
So the team that won is sort of a mix. This to me is like a single entry or 3-max type lineup for a smaller field than 23,000. It's more for like a 1,000 or 2,000 because you do have some differentiation, right? You have Jefferson over Kupp, like as a big one right away. That traded a lot of ownership in terms of what you gave up there. At quarterback, Herbert was going to be a little bit different this week than most of the like higher utilized quarterbacks. So you're at 9% here. And so yes, there's decent cumulative total ownership here, but really the chalkiest plays were the running backs, which is the place that if you're going to be chalky is usually the right place to be chalky because projected volume is the easiest thing to kind of deal with. And it was running backs who were underpriced. I mean, Saquon Barkley and Clyde Edwards-Helaire were first or second round picks 3 weeks ago. And they're combined now in this week for, $12,000 in salary or less. And so those are opportunities to certainly take advantage of. And then everybody else ends up being around, 10% or below. So I'm surprised that this lineup ascended all the way to top, especially on a week where Cooper Kupp had such a strong performance as well and was so highly utilized by the field. But it is a good indicator that once again, you can build really, really solid lineups and kind of just don't play all of the chalk. Right? You just don't play all of it. You can play some of it still. And ideally, when you're going to play it, it's going to be more associated with this running back position than it is going to be fragile positions like tight end, defense, so on and so forth. And again, the defense was a big separator this week with the Saints that got up to 20 points.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Congrats to Jeffrey Lee. Thank you for being such a valued member of our Discord community. Congrats on the cash here. We didn't get to your Josh Allen double here today, but I want to let everybody know we were hard on Jeffrey Lee's lineup for no correlation. He did play a Josh Allen double in the other lineup that he sent us. We just thought this one was more interesting. Get in the Discord. You could be the member of the month and get all the glory here. Have your lineup ripped apart by Dink next month. For Drew. For Jerry. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.